Here we go. So welcome everybody. As you're trickling into the chat room, please let us know what city you're joining from. We always have a really fantastic global audience on our webinars and our conferences, so we would love to see where you're from. Where are you joining from today, Jai and Cash and Serena?
I am actually in the Poconos, Pennsylvania today.
Oh, exotic.
Yeah.
I am not anywhere nearly as scenic. I'm right in the Washington, D.C. metro area.
Oh, still beautiful.
Oh, wow. I'm looking at New Jersey. We've got Trinidad and Tobago. Incredible. So I am calling in from Bristol, which is in the UK, which has recently become famous due to the toppling of Edward Colston, who was an ex-slave trader.
Awesome. Very cool. Mine's a bit more boring, but I'm joining from Raleigh, North Carolina. And if you see my hair like slightly blowing in the wind, it's because I have a fan in here because it is so hot outside. So I apologize for that bit of ambiance. Let's see. Oh, we have Cynthia from Colombia. Welcome. Yves from Cali, Chicago. Amazing. Okay. Let's get started. We have a 50-minute panel today, so I want to make sure we can ask as many questions as possible. So just really quick, I'm Marcy. I lead the Grassroots Community Program at Fiverr. I'm so excited to be in the same room / virtual room as Jai and Serena and Kishish today, talking about creating diversity while working remotely. So I think we can all agree that hard work and talent should be what matters most in the professional world. But we also know that that is not always the case. We have to recognize that the systemic barriers presented by age and gender and ethnicity and orientation, religion, they exist, and we have to constantly work to be advocates for those impacted in both personal and professional worlds. So over the next 50 minutes, like I said, we're going to explore the I've been talking a lot today, so give me discrimination that the professional world and what we can do about it. We'll also talk about the concept of remote work and how D&I can exist in that space, and what challenges and opportunities come with that. But above all else, why D&I has to be a focus for all of us, regardless of situation, moving forward. So just quick reminders to everybody watching. If we have time, there is going to be a live Q&A at the end of this session. So if you can, just type out your questions as you have them and note on your computer, and then I'll give you like a 5-minute warning when we're about to do Q&A so we don't lose those in the chat as we're going through. Speaking of the chat, we want you to be vocal today. We want to know that you're in the room with us. I wish we were all in a physical space right now together, but since we can't do that, we definitely want to know what excites you about this conversation. So give some exclamation points, give like a woohoo or a you go girl or whatever feels natural to you, within reason, of course. And with that said, let's dive right in. So first, I would love for each of you to introduce yourself and speak a little bit about what you do in the D&I space. And we'll start with Jai and then move to Cash and then Serena.
Thank you so much, Marcy. Hi, everyone. My name is Jai Vargas. I've been in the multicultural marketing / diversity and inclusion space for about 15 years now. And about 2 years ago, I left corporate America to be a consultant, an entrepreneur, my own boss in this space. The majority of the time, I work with organizations that are looking to improve the culture, the diverse recruiting strategies, the engagement, the inclusion, and the communication amongst their organization. A lot of the time I spend focused on doing benchmark assessments, employee surveys, to really develop programming that we're going to execute. I work a lot with employee resource groups and business resource groups, and I'm really excited to be here with you all. The majority of the time I work with creating leadership development, and hopefully we'll get to know a little bit about you all and we can share some of our tidbits when it comes to diversity and inclusion here today. Thanks for joining us.
Kash, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. My name is Kashish Parikh Chopra, and you can call me Kash because it's a lot easier to say, and that's a lesson in diversity and inclusion all in itself of why I use a nickname. I am a mindset coach based out of Washington, D.C., and I specialize in helping early stage founders and entrepreneurs break out of the status quo and real self boundaries that they need to break through in order to take unapologetic action and live the quality lives that they want to live. The reason I got into this is because I started my career over 15 years ago. Before I learned that carbs were amazing, I'm a former beauty queen. I was a former Miss India USA and the Miss Congeniality for the United States. And I was the first openly gay Miss Congeniality for the United States. As part of that, that was an era where being gay and Indian and open was not an open part of the conversation. And as they wanted to take my sash away, I became a pissed off Indian woman and realized I did not want to live by anyone's status quo. I am a former practicing attorney for national law firms and national consulting firms. Honestly, an old white man's game. And after being in corporate America as a lawyer, I realized enough with it. And I focused in on my passion, which is working with early founders, early entrepreneurs, and helping them as a mindset coach, which is how I'm here today and looking forward to adding to the conversation.
Wow, what a panel, right? Hello, everyone. My name's Serena Abassi, and I am a independent equity, inclusion, and diversity consultant. So similarly, I go into organisations, I help them collate quantitative data, and then we drill that down into focus groups, which is qualitative research. In addition to that, it's really kind of, I spend a lot of time kind of coaching actually senior leadership out of their biases and actually really getting them to kind of open up to another reality or realities. And I suppose the best way for me to describe what I do is that I make organizations more human, and I've taken my activism into a corporate space.
Amazing.
Someone say,
thank you.
See me.
I can see you. So it might be, I think that was OG who was saying that.
Yeah.
So if you want to try refreshing your screen, that might be a good fix for that if anyone's having trouble. So for the sake of organization, I guess, I'm going to direct all these questions to a specific person, but all of you please feel free to weigh in. So the first one I want to address to Jai. What are some opportunities working remotely presents as it relates to diversity and inclusion? And that can be from an employee or an employer point of view.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marcy. You know, we've actually seen a lot of progress when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and because we're all working remotely and from home because of COVID, we've actually leveled out the playing field amongst a very underrepresented community, and that's people with disabilities. I think it's important to understand that there is now a little bit more equal access and fair opportunities for them in specific areas like productivity. Now people with disabilities have more access. They feel more comfortable at home working amongst us as well. They have a safe space and they don't have to worry about commuting to the meeting room or having a very extensive commute. I commute into New York City when before COVID actually came about. And it was actually pretty challenging for a lot of the colleagues that I know to be able to commute on a bus, on a train, through stairwells. And so this has really leveled the playing field when it comes to us working just from this box and just from this screen. I mean, imagine all of the challenges that come about when you are navigating New York City in a wheelchair. Now that we're all working from home, it actually gives people with disabilities more flexibility as well, particularly when it comes to their medications. They don't have to bring them to work. They have their own safe space and their safe haven already set up in their home. I also feel like there is less judgment now that we're all sort of on the same playing field and we're all working from home. It makes it less complicated for people with disabilities to have to talk about their disabilities. And so no longer are we really focused on how they're showing up. We're all showing up almost in the same space. And so now we can focus on the productivity, the output of the work, their skills and their talents and their competencies, and not so much if these organizations are set up for these individuals to be successful. Because let's face it, some organizations, their physical spaces aren't set up for individuals with disabilities and perhaps trying to access buildings and walkways with a wheelchair. So I'm really glad that there is more of opportunity for individuals with disabilities to be able to work alongside of us now that we're all working next to each other. So that's a really interesting one that's come about, particularly when it comes to remote work and people with disabilities and how D&I is impacting those individuals. So I really love that one.
Absolutely. Kash or Serena, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think in addition to that, people that suffer anxiety just getting on the public transport, like not just physical disabilities, but also mental health, neurodiversity, it really has leveled the playing field in a huge, huge way, which is exciting. And I hope the momentum stays. And I suppose, not to go off tangent, but I don't know what it's like in the US, but in the UK, a huge number of our workforce in this country had to be furloughed. And our furlough scheme in this country, you were actually paid. I don't know if it's the same in the US, but we got paid a salary from the government. And I think it's also kind of taken the stigma out of being supported by the government in this country, because as you probably know, the UK is incredibly classist, and I think that's been a huge mindset shift for a lot of people, like a very, very humbling in many ways, that people that are white collar professionals have actually been funded by the government over this period of time because their corporations just couldn't afford to have them there.
I want to add on to this idea of a leveled playing field, because it's interesting, when I was in corporate America as an attorney, I was able to work anywhere I needed to work, but now it's forced upon us. And I think it's forced a change of our mindset to a place where we really understand we can work anywhere. And that means our teams can look and be whatever we want them to be. We used to think of, well, I have to hire someone who can commute in, who can be physically there with my culture that I'm building. But now we're being forced into a situation, a great situation, where we can create the teams, hire talent from across the country, across the world, with less barrier, because now we're getting used to what this new idea of a workplace really is. And that goes straight to the idea of culture, diversity, inclusion, and what we want mission, vision, values of our organizations to be.
Fantastic. Yes, absolutely. So Kash, I want to have you answer this one first, and then again, Jai and Serena, please let me know if you want to weigh in as well. What are some challenges that working remotely presents? So I guess like the flip side of what we just talked about. And again, that can be from the perspective of an employer or the employee.
And so I've got a few, though there is an endless list of these. In the same way, there's an endless list of opportunities.
Go for it.
For one, and Marcy, we were just talking about this before the session opened up, I'm a momtrepreneur, and I own the fact that I'm a momtrepreneur. But there are a lot of women who are having to make very tough decisions about their career because working from home conflicts with childcare. And so that's one evolving challenge that I wish I had solutions for right now. But that's going to be a new challenge that employers and employees have to figure out and find creative solutions for, because the school system and childcare are no longer going to support the go-get-'em woman who's always had to work harder than the men in the workforce. I'm just going to put it out there and say. So that's one challenge that I see. Another challenge is we're such collective beings by nature, humans, and I can be an isolationist. I like being alone with a glass of wine, but I love working with a team. And now that our teams are on Zoom, on Skype, on Teams, whatever platform you're using, there's a whole new challenge of how do you build a strong culture inside your team and organization when you're not physically present with someone? Because when you are across from a screen, squares are great. I feel like we're the Brady Bunch, but it does create an extra challenge because you're not physically bonded to someone. I keep telling my clients, social distancing doesn't have to mean virtual in connection or virtual disconnection. And I think that's something that many people are having to struggle with for the first time, and forwardly think, again, what are my mission, vision, values? What is my intention with my team? What do I want from this workplace and from my work style, from my company? And I think that's a real challenge when you're not face-to-face with someone. It's a whole new interpersonal skill set to learn.
Yep. Absolutely. Jai or Serena, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think a challenge that I've seen come about within a particular organization that I'm helping is that a lot of the individuals who used to be very hands-on and walking by your cubicle and walking by your office every day, and you can see them and hear them and physically get helped by them, they're sort of feeling like out of sight, out of mind. A lot of the administrative assistants that I am helping in these groups feel like a lot of their power and their help that they used to share with the entire team has been taken away from them, because now a lot of their managers and the remainder of the community at large has sort of practiced being self-sufficient. Now they can book their own travel, and now they have time to do a lot of those little things that the administrative assistants were helping them do in the past. And so a lot of these individuals are sort of grappling at the fact like, wow, now I've got to take on a whole new personality to be able to stand out. And how can I do that with my manager without being annoying or feel like I'm pestering them and letting them know, hey, still here, still working for you. Please let me know if I can do something for you. And a good majority of the work that those executive and administrative assistants were doing was booking travel and booking hotels and planning executive conferences and summits. Not a lot of that is happening anymore. And so there's a really big community out there trying to reassess how they can transfer or create some new skill sets so that they don't disappear in the eyes of their managers.
Yeah. I can imagine from your all's perspective too, like when you start working with a new client, you probably like to go into the business, really get to know the people, see what the culture is, and you're not able to do that right now. So how has that changed how you work with clients and how you really get to know the culture there? That's for anyone.
Yeah. I just wanted to go, it totally works for this question as well, but building a culture, because actually it isn't culture that binds us, it's values that bind us. You know, that's a space that we have to kind of move into. You know, America, the UK, we're made up of lots of different cultures, and it's values that binds us. And as someone that has had several long distance romantic relationships, I know for sure that I can build a relationship, a strong relationship with like radical honesty and being able to communicate in the most beautiful, seamless way with physical distance. And so we can absolutely do it for our organizations, in my view. And, you know, I've just taken on a new client, haven't met them physically in any way. And organization-wise, there are about 100 people. And oh my gosh, I got such a huge connection to all of them. I think it's already been touched upon, but I think it's about us kind of having to kind of reassess how we connect. And actually, you know, Cash, you said it, which was perfect. I saw this quote once, which was, physical distance doesn't mean that there doesn't need to be solidarity or something. I'm not giving the quote justice, but there are different modes of connecting and feeling like you are part of the collective than having to be physically in the same space.
Serena, can we do a separate panel on successful long distance relationships?
Oh, absolutely.
That would be great.
I'm going to put the lights
That room.
more about that. You can see my face.
So you just brought up a really important point though, which is inclusivity. So can you define what it means to have a truly inclusive culture? And what does that culture look like within a company? And we'll take Serena first on that one, and then please feel free to add.
Yeah, sure. What does it mean to have a really inclusive company? Where you have got representation at every single level, that people feel that they can raise their hands, speak their truth without feeling like the stakes are too high to do so. Yeah, it's all of that.
Awesome.
I want to add one extra layer to what Serena just said, and add a layer of empowerment into all that, as if that's the thread sewing it all together like a garment. I think that the ability of empowerment really drives a long way with what that means and what it goes for, how it runs the values, how it creates the fuel for all of our organizations.
Love that. Awesome. Jai, I'm going to direct this one to you. How can a company, this is a very broad one, so feel free to answer it however you want to. How can a company with no history of D&I initiatives begin the process of building that program? What is a good starting point for that?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, especially recently because of the recent racial unrest in the US, here in our country and abroad as well. There's so many organizations that are trying to figure out what is the best way for them to start their diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. A lot of these organizations, number one, assume that they aren't diverse. And so I do a lot of work with them in helping them understand, number one, who are their people. I have an incredible organization that I work with called Pluto. It's a diversity and inclusion platform. It's an employee survey, and we survey the individuals of any organization when we ask them about their experiences, how they came to this company or country, how they were recruited. Do they feel like they belong? Do they feel like they are being paid fairly? We ask a lot of the right questions first. So the number one thing that I always suggest organizations should do is a baseline assessment of who their people are and what their challenges are. Because from that point is when we can literally start building programs that are going to solve for those challenges. That's going to help us build solutions. I think the number one mistake that organizations make is assuming that they know what their employees and their organizations need. And so they'll start and say, we want to be a diverse and equitable and inclusive organization. We need to start with an unconscious bias training right now. And maybe that's not what your organization needs. So it's very important to first start by asking the right questions. And like I said, I work with an organization called Pluto.life. And it all starts with knowing your people first and then building solutions and programs around that to help them internally mobilize and feel included. So that would be the first step among many.
I love that perspective of building for the people who are there and not the company as a whole. I think that's awesome. Does anyone want to add to that?
I couldn't agree more. That's exactly how you have to start. And when you're building like a diversity and inclusion strategy, an equity strategy, it's a collaborative effort. Like, it's the people that build it, and that's why you conduct the focus groups. So yeah, just totally agreeing with everything that you've just said.
I'm giving two hands up of a yes to Jai on what she said, and Serena. And to also add, once you start these initiatives, they don't just go by the wind. You have to set some sort of milestone. The great power of a benchmark is later on you're testing, you're measuring to see where have things gone. Maybe it didn't work, and that's okay. And I want to stress that point for everyone. When we try new things, when we try to impact our values, live by our values, lead by our values, we're not always going to make the right decisions, and that's okay. I always say that inaction is a choice to just not take action. It's a passive, I'm too scared to take action moment. But we have to be okay and accept that sometimes we're going to take action with great intention, but we might miss the mark. But that fear shouldn't stop us from trying to ask those questions that Jai was saying, to get to know who our teams are, get to understand what Serena was saying about values that are binding us together. That way we can correct ourselves, auto-correct ourselves, measure ourselves, and keep pushing forward and really build that momentum so it goes somewhere.
I love that. I was listening to a webinar last night, and I really don't want to butcher this quote. So if I do, I'm just going to go get it and post it in the chat. But this woman named Abadesi said something to the effect of the fight for equality is like climate change. Everything you do either helps or hurts it. There's no in between. And it's like, gosh, what you were saying with inaction, like that's still a choice to have inaction instead of action. But I thought that was.
Oh my God, are you talking about Abadesi,
yes.
who lives in the UK? Yeah, she's like a friend of mine. That is wild. Oh
okay.
That's so wild. Sorry.
I'll send you, no, it's okay. I'll send you that webinar. It was fantastic. It's actually on my LinkedIn right now, but I'll post it in the chat later. Such a fantastic panel. That one, but also this one, because y'all are awesome. Anyways, so Jai mentioned this a second ago, but because of Black Lives Matter, there's just been this huge surge of companies feeling like they have to have a D&I program because it's trendy. So Serena, I would love to direct this one to you. How can brands approach D&I in an organic and authentic way that moves us forward into an integrated world and not just this temporary trend?
Yeah, great question. So absolutely, we've probably heard a lot about kind of the performativity that is sitting around some brands that are trying to be part of this movement. And actually, I was on a panel earlier today, second panel of the day, and we were speaking about. So I mentioned that America, the US, the UK, we're primarily white countries, right? And therefore, it's very, very probable that a lot of organizations aren't going to have a representation, a diverse ethnic representation. And that's absolutely fine, because it's just, localism is a huge factor in that. If you're part of, in the UK, if you live in a really rural part of the country, totally it makes sense that you're not going to have representation. However, I think it's about being really authentic in the sense where if you want to be part of the Black Lives Matter movement and really work towards dismantling this system of oppression towards Black and brown people, and obviously there's lots of other types of oppression, then it is about your commitment more than anything. And I think it's your commitment to the cause which doesn't make it performative. So if you're like, actually, I'm committed, like for the long haul, the long game in this, then I think that's incredible. And I think it's about working. If you don't have a Black presence within your organization, then it's about building, nurturing, cultivating those relationships with organizations that, serve Black communities.
Absolutely. No, I love that point of partnering with organizations that are already doing it right. Because I think a lot of brands right now are assuming that they need to automatically know how to do this, and that's not true. They need to be listening to the people who have been doing it organically and authentically for 10 years. And sorry, I'm going to get off my soapbox. Jai or Cash, would you like to add to that?
No, I completely agree with that. And it has everything to do with making sure that you go above and beyond just the immediate network or community that you've built, right? Because a lot of times, like hires like, and we've seen a lot of brands and companies build with people that look just like them. And, there are some challenges to that. But the fact of the matter is that perhaps they haven't built a more diverse community around themselves. And so it's going out into the LinkedIn sphere and saying, hey, Serena, who do you know that could fit this position and do a really great job? And I don't know anyone else. Could you help me in filling this role? And so just getting out of our little bubble and literally just Googling some great organizations that are doing it well or that can help.
I mean, to add on to that, I'm going to speak for Jai and Serena. Find us on LinkedIn. Find us on social media. I'm about to blow up all of your LinkedIns, by the way. Message us, because I'm sure we're probably, sorry, I'm speaking for you guys. We're not shy. We won't bite. We can't physically because we're on the computer, but ask us for help if you need help. And, Serena mentioned a really great word. She said serve, and Jai said the word community. And when you think about servitude in our communities, when we go back and we think about who we are as individuals, as just authentic people, And then we think about I'll call it our professional work selves. Who are we serving as individuals, just in a day-to-day basis? I always say I always want to leave a room a little better than I found it. That's part of my servitude in life every day. But then what are we serving in our communities as individuals, but also as, again, those mission, vision, values of our teams, our organizations, our startups, our passion projects, even our hobbies. They have impacts on our community. It doesn't matter whether you are knitting sweaters, delivering lunches, or if you're starting the next, revolutionized, decentralized currency of the world. We all have an impact, and we all have people that we can serve. And when we think of it through that lens, authenticity really binds it together. And as Serena was saying, there's that long game for it. There are people who are going to come and go with a tagline and email of their commitment to diversity. I'm going to say right now, and I think some people on the panel may, raise your hand, say yes in the chat if you've ever been in this position. I'm tired of being the token anything for anyone and being part of someone else's moment to look good in the spotlight. And I feel like there have been times with pride, I see the yeses coming in. I see this with gay rights. I'm seeing it with Black Lives Matter and the entrepreneurs I work with. There are so women when it comes to compensation, entrepreneurs, there are so many times where that short game, it's pretty obvious when someone's playing it. So then ask yourselves those questions of, how are you being authentic to yourself and who you're serving and your community? And I'll get off my soapbox. Marcy knows I can go on and on about this.
No, I love it. I have goosebumps. Keep going. Awesome. So we just talked a little bit about brands in general, like how they're approaching this, et cetera, et cetera. Have any of you, seen a brand or program that is doing this well, that maybe is starting to do this for not necessarily the first time, but is a little bit new to this, and you're like, oh, I really like that approach, or, I'll stop there. Not everyone at once.
I'll jump in with
the answer can also be no. So
I've got a few answers, and they're not the Fortune 500 companies. The Houston Food Bank is an organization that my wife and we work with on a regular basis through one of the companies we own. We own a number of different companies, and one of them is we own a promotional printing company here in the States. And I'm wearing this Houston Strong T-shirt. We created shirts for them and masks. Houston, George Floyd, everything with the pandemic, they're being completely outrun, and they were looking for more ways to engage with their community and the people they're serving, which is a highly diverse crowd and community that is underprivileged as well. And so we've been working with them because they're finding new ways to outreach, and everything that we sell through one of our companies helps provide meals to people through the Houston Food Banks. And it's interesting because people don't often think of a nonprofit or a food bank as being a leader in a diversity and inclusion initiative or trying to engage with the community. But it goes back to that concept I was saying earlier. There are so many organizations that are serving a community. And when they take a step back to go at what Jai was saying, there are people that we're serving in those communities. And when we take almost a self-audit of who those people are, it's encouraging when, I'll be honest, I thought I was going to get on a phone call with people of privilege who were just trying to do the right thing. And they blew me out of the water with how they wanted to engage with this diverse community that they were a part of. So, that's a really non-typical answer that I wanted to throw out there. From another, I'll call a brand, though the chat box might light up with this one. The DC government here in my hometown has taken a lot of amazing steps at really showing their commitment to diversity and inclusion. Mariel Browser, our mayor here, one of the first things she did was she was out in the streets with protesters and a megaphone and a mask, thank God, and then authorized the painting in big yellow letters, Black Lives Matter, on what is essentially, I've been hearing debates, potentially federal street and federal land in front of the White House. And that's someone who, from a leader, I know it's not a company, but our local governments are brands when you think about them. And so her stance and what she's done here in DC has really shown a commitment from a local government perspective to diversity and inclusion. So I wanted to kind of throw that one out there.
Awesome. I like your point about how the food bank wasn't necessarily doing anything, grandiose, but they were doing what they could and what made sense for them and what felt authentic to them. So that's awesome. I think that's really all we can ask of companies.
And I suppose it's about like working within your sphere of influence, right? Because this is what it's about. It's like, where do I hold power? And I think that's why also a lot of people get quite overwhelmed when they think about this movement, because they're like, how do I contribute to something that is so big and feels so far removed as well from my reality? And I suppose if you just think about your sphere of influence, I think that's a perfect example of it.
Awesome. So going back to remote work specifically, and also relating to how companies are treating D&I, I think a lot of people are in a place where they want to facilitate a conversation about this, but are struggling with how to do that at a distance. So again, let's start with Jai on this one. How can companies create a safe virtual space for a discussion about D&I?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of these, and they take different shapes and forms, and it really has everything to do with the way in which a culture and a current community within an organization is already set up. I've been doing tons of listening sessions with organizations as well as town halls. I think the number one thing that is important to understand for the type of work that I do, and I'm sure the other ladies can also agree with this, you want to make sure that there is absolute buy-in and leverage with senior leaders. When I get a call and a request, I don't want to talk to someone who hasn't been given the authority to make real change and to hire real people and to embed policies to really move the organization forward, right? So when I have these conversations, I want to know where the CEO is. I want to know where the VP is. I want to know where these executives stand, what they've already been talking about. And when we pull together some of these town halls and listening sessions, it should be moderated by them. And so a lot of the times, of course, it's challenging to want to speak your mind and to really speak out against what you're going through without experiencing retaliation from leadership. So that's why I work with this organization called Pluto.life. It's an incredible anonymous surveying tool where employees can send in a message or chat anonymously, with the organization and the leadership, and they can just speak their mind. So it's incredibly important to be able to set up some of those safe spaces without feeling like you're going to be retaliated against if you raise your hand and you're like, hello, I'm not being paid fairly, or hello, I'm the only Latina on the team and there's 78 of us. How come I have the burden of translating documents? That's not even part of my job. You don't even pay me for that. But I feel like I may be retaliated against if I say what I'm really feeling. And so it's setting up a lot of those anonymous chats and messages. And I want to see the CEO is out there. And then I also want to be brought in as an outside consultant to do these private one-on-one talks with executives so that I can really take the temperature of what they're actually doing and how they actually feel. Like Cash was mentioning, sometimes you feel like you're going to talk to people with extreme privilege that want to come in and act like saviors and heroes. But then you're actually really surprised with, oh, wow, their story is a lot deeper and a lot colorful than many would assume. And so, yeah, it's very complex, but it's an evolving sort of way of working.
Yeah, thank you. Kasha or Serena, do you want to add to that?
I mean, I'll chime in a bit. I mentioned that I'm a former practicing attorney, and my specialty was corporate compliance. And I've spent a significant part of my career doing focus groups, speaking to employees and understanding how does tone from the top really get to the frontline employees of an organization. And I know that it becomes a little bit more complex. It's a big waterfall when you think of a large organization, but even on a small team, Jai is right. If you don't have buy-in, that tone from the top, diversity inclusion is just going to be a soundbite. I'm just going to say it. It's just going to be a soundbite. And I would even level it up a little bit more and say, if you have a formal board of directors, what is your board of directors doing as far as commitment to show your organization, to show the C-suite, as I call it, the culture suite, and your employees what the commitment really is for the company? And what are they saying to set the tone outwardly in the community for what that organization, for what your organization means? I think it even goes up to the board of directors.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You know, the CEO or the board of directors, you know, they're the embodiment of the organization. So if they aren't on board with the values of the people, there's a huge disconnect. And if they're not committed, you're not going to see that commitment elsewhere in the organization. And if you do, what happens, and I've seen this multiple times, there's a groundswell that happens. So people start to mobilize. The people are enlightened. However, what happens is they see that actually the way that they see the world and how they see themselves is so far removed from how their leaders operate and see the world. And actually then they just leave. And I've seen this happen time and time again. Amazing people leave organizations because they're like, you know what? The people at the top, values-wise, there's no magic. there's no synergy. They don't reflect me, and then they go.
I mean, to build off that, because we're all forced to be remote right now, even though some offices, some teams are repopulating their offices, social distancing, we all have the ability to be agents of change right now, even by taking small actions. And by that, I mean, maybe you're in a position where you run a team, even if it's of 2 people. Maybe you have virtual office hours on Zoom where if they want to come talk to you about anything, not project related, they can. Maybe it's having that one-off check-in or reserving 10 minutes in a staff meeting or a one-on-one to just check in and say, how are you doing with everything going on? We're unfortunately living in an age of anxiety. We have riots across the world. We have a pandemic that, at least here in the States, is getting worse for a number of issues. The pressures of work and productivity are not going away, and we still have to be accountable. That's a lot of pressure on a person. And because we're not next to one another and we're remote, I think we all do have a responsibility to still check in on one another in our companies, in our teams, in our friend circles, in our communities of masterminds, whatever you're a part of. That way we can facilitate, while being remote, not having people get fatigued and burnt out trying to deal with these issues of D&I and how it's impacting them personally and professionally.
Amazing. So for everyone watching, we are going to start taking questions from the audience in about 3 to 4 minutes. So please go ahead and start putting those in the chat. I'm going to ask one more question and then we'll move to Q&A. I want to preface by saying there is not a right or perfect answer for this question. I'm just curious what your perspectives are on it. When you're working with a client, what is the moment when you think, obviously nothing's ever going to be perfect, but what is the moment when you think they understand this, or I got through to them, or I can step away and let them take the reins now? What is that moment for you usually when you're working with someone?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I got a little bit sidetracked and I was reading. Just to be really honest.
I appreciate it. No, thank you. Basically, when you're working with a client, what's that moment when you know that it's okay to step away and let them take the reins? That they've gotten, I know, see your face. That's kind of the point of this question, but I'm curious what your experience is with that and when you feel comfortable letting them take it from there.
I think it kind of relates back to the last question and, the comments that were raised by Yar, that I feel most confident when I know that the person with the most power within the organisation is on board with the agenda. And actually, the panel that I was on earlier today, the moderator read out a quote that was on Twitter, and I can't remember the person who had said it, but the quote basically was, shouldn't CEOs become the new chief diversity officer? And I thought that was an absolutely, in so many ways, like actually, when it comes to equity, inclusion and diversity, this needs to be baked into the business strategy. It needs to be front and center of any business strategy. And the only person that can do that is the person that's in a position of power. And that, for me, is when I feel comfortable to walk away.
Jai or Kash, you can jump in if you'd like to.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really clear and it's valuable when they, number one, allocate a budget, not just for this year, but also for next year. Mm-hmm. And also, we have seen many times before that corporate America has either quarterly assessments or biannual assessments or annual assessments at the end of the year that determine your internal mobility, whether you get a promotion or an increase in your salary. I think that those 5 or 6 points, one of them has to do with how you're moving diversity, equity, and inclusion forward within this organization. Like, this KPI needs to be tied to your bonus structure. And if you get a 0 because you didn't do absolutely anything for diversity, equity, and inclusion, then you're not getting a bonus, or it's not going to be as impactful, or you're not going to move up in the ladder. I think that when they put those, KPIs in place and they attach a dollar amount to it is when we can really say, all right, now you get it. So that's just one of them. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going to say hell yes to what both you ladies said, because I completely agree. And I think as you were both saying, it really drills down to tone from the top, having real commitment and having it be accountability, because, you're right. When it becomes part of KPIs, when it's part of your performance review annual and it's written down as an expectation, you can't run from it. It becomes ingrained in the operations of your team and organization. And when it's not a check the box cultural item, I feel like it's very obvious when it's just a check the box exercise for a team, for a CEO, for an executive director, for an organization. But once it becomes ingrained in the operations, it's like a muscle. It's an involuntary action because it's tied into your actions on a daily basis, because that's who you are. It's ingrained in the identity of you as a professional, you as an organization. And that's where the kind of the magic happens. And it really starts from where you both said it comes from. Yeah.
I love that. I love the idea of that being baked into your KPIs, because then it becomes a habit. And like you said, it's written down. So it's known. That is expected of you. That's a great idea. Okay, so we have about 6 minutes for Q&A, but I want to try to get through at least a few of these. So this one is from Daryl, and I think this is a really important question and probably on a lot of people's minds watching. What can white people do to initiate D&I projects, and also in the same vein, defeat skepticism while they're doing that? So make it authentic, I guess, is a better way to say that.
I'd love to kind of answer that. So I really think it's about, and actually we were speaking about this in I conducted a focus group as well today. It's been a busy day. I really think it's about, if you're not willing to have really difficult, uncomfortable conversations with the people that you love the most, that are in your immediate circle, I think there's something slightly unauthentic about then having those conversations on a much larger scale to your organization. I genuinely feel the work starts in the home. It starts with obviously the self being really self-reflective about, I don't call it unconscious bias, I might call it at stretch subconscious bias. I think we're very aware of our biases, and actually I think the lockdown has actually really forced us to look at ourselves in a way that we've never had to before. So I think it's about making sure that you're doing the work in the spaces that are the most intimate to you, as well as doing the work outside. And I think to do it in a authentic way. There's always going to be people that are going to be skeptical, to be honest. But I think as long as you stay really firm in your belief about why you're doing it, and once again, as I said earlier, being committed to the long game, I think, good on you.
I want to jump in for just a second and totally agree with that. I know when BLM started growing, there were a few people in my family that I talked to and was surprised at their perspectives, but I will say it helped me understand what I didn't understand, and it gave me a basis to start educating myself. So when I got in the same conversation, maybe a week later, I had better answers for them. And that was probably my biggest takeaway over the past couple of weeks, is like, talk to people so you know what to study up on, so you can be more impactful to them next time. But anyways, Jai or Cash, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, you know what, thank you, Daryl, for asking that question. I am of the belief that diversity, equity, inclusion, culture, communication within an organization shouldn't only be the responsibility of a person of color. I think a chief diversity officer can come in any shape, size, or color. It should be a shared responsibility. It actually makes me quite mad that every time that there's a new chief diversity officer, it's actually a Black man, 9 out of 10 times. And so we need a little bit more diversity in diversity. I appreciate others coming into this space. And I had a manager many years ago who was a Caucasian woman, and she was more aware and more cultured and more in tune with diversity than I ever was at that point when I was in that organization. And I was just blown away by her authenticity, by her genuineness, by her love. And that was really powerful for her to share her position and her power and her influence in this space, and to share her privilege in that way. I was like, my goodness, yes, you're gonna take us across the finish line in these cases. So I think it's a shared responsibility. And if someone wants to get involved, please help. That's just my humble opinion.
I mean, if there's ever someone who's worried about being labeled the white savior, I think a great place that all of us should start, no matter what color of our skin, gender, sex, anything. I think when we ask ourselves why something's important to us, why are we trying to dedicate ourselves to this initiative, to this act of change, to this value, when we ask ourselves why and have that honest question, like Marcy was saying she was having with her family, it pushes ourselves to understand ourselves better and understand one another better. And then you know you're being authentic, you know your why. There's always going to be a hater, no matter what the role is. There's always going to be a hater when someone's stepping into any role, any initiative, any cultural or value change. And I think at the end of the day, if you're going to try to be the actor of change, say F it and be willing to have someone label you something ugly, because that's probably going to happen no matter what. Sorry to be ugly and honest right there, but.
No, it's true. I appreciate that. Okay, we have 1 minute, but I think this is an important question, so I want to try and squeeze it in. If we could just do like a quick round robin on this one. If you're looking for local resources to either partner with or draw inspiration from, where can you look for that? What's a good place to start?
For local resources? That's a good question.
I mean, honestly, I've learned a ton just by following all of you on LinkedIn. So, and it doesn't even, I mean, in my opinion, like Serena was saying, I watched a webinar that was based in the UK last night. It still helped me exponentially. And so I would challenge that by saying they don't necessarily have to be local. But I think a great start for me has been just following people in New York. Well, I'm in Raleigh currently, but following people in my area who are sharing education about what I want to learn about. And usually they also share events or webinars or organizations or what have you that you can partner up with.
I'm going to quickly piggyback off
anyone...
that to round Robin this around. You know, I always say success leaves clues, and everyone who's in this group right now or watches this recording, there is a mentor, a thought leader, someone that you can, I'll say, internet idealize, and you can follow them on IG, you can follow them on LinkedIn, you can send them a quick message and say, can I have 5 minutes of your time? I would love to pick your brain about XYZ. Maybe they'll respond, maybe they won't. What's the worst that can happen? But if you follow that person who is doing what you are trying to do, what you want your organization to look like, what you want your life to look like, you can reverse engineer what they are doing right and cut your learning curve in half so you don't do what they did wrong to get where they are. So that would be my tidbit.
Yeah, I agree to all of that. And I'll add that on LinkedIn, you can actually follow hashtags. And so you can look up hashtag diversity and inclusion or pay equality. August 13th is Black Women's Equal Pay Day. So you can follow hashtags like that so that you can start to receive that content and information so that you can learn and share and be able to have a pretty dangerous conversation with your friends and your community and your family that needs it.
Amazing. Okay, well, we're at time. So I really just want to thank all of you so much for being here today. That was a really inspiring conversation. Also, just a huge thank you for dedicating your career to make sure that everyone has a fair chance to succeed in their career and in their development. I think I speak for everyone when I say I'm excited to keep following you and see what you do over the next years and however long you're in this space. Also, I wanted to invite everyone to stick around. In 3 minutes, we have 2 other panels starting. One is connection in the time of COVID in your sessions tab. And then the other is effective email marketing in the main stage. So hopefully we will see you at one of those. And also if you, Jai and Cash and Serena, want to pop your contact information in the chat so people can follow you on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, would love for you to do that.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah. But thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate that. And all of you watching as well. And we'll see you in 3 minutes. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a phenomenal day.
Much.